Why do I feel so alone even though I have people around me?
Wow, I love this question because I had the exact same problem. Why did I feel so alone even when people were around me? Why did I feel alone in a crowd? Why did I feel alone if I was with a girl in the same bed and I still felt alone or lonely, but I felt alone, which is a little different than feeling lonely. Why did that happen and how did I resolve it is obviously what this video is going to be about, since that's the question that the audience wants to know the answer to. How does that happen? Well, first let's talk about why that happens. The experience we're having of life is not always determined by our circumstances. Of course, we feel better when we have better circumstances. The external does affect our internal feelings. But the external is often created by, if not entirely created by, our internal programming. So if we have a program inside of us, like I'm alone, is embedded in the unconscious mind, no amount of external positivity will make that go away. We might be in a room full of wonderful people who love us and still feel alone because that feeling is embedded inside of us and is not created by the external reality. It's not created by your circumstances. It was installed there a long time before. You might have even inherited it from your parents. Can you imagine that? Inheriting patterns. But we do. In fact, science has recently proven it as a fact. We inherit our parents' old emotions and programs. And so you have this feeling inside of you that is actually an old programming from the past. Now, there's many ways to permanently work on this issue, which I call the 4 major tools of transformation. And there's one other side tool that I actually used for myself that was necessary for me to no longer feel alone, which I did feel alone all the time, even though I wasn't alone. Now, I discovered I had this pattern right after I invented the 7 Steps to Reprogramming Yourself in May of 2003. I was erasing different emotional buttons that came up. So I'd get upset and I would say, oh, what am I upset about? Let me erase this. And I would use the 7-step process that I invented and I would erase the old emotion. And then I would feel better in a permanent way, and that particular issue would never come back up. And for the first 4 months after I invented the 7 steps, I just cleared whatever came up that day, which the very first day was over 50 different things, if you can imagine how messed up my life was. I was upset 50 times a day on average. So I made a big list of all the things that were coming up and worked on them and worked on them. And what I found for the first 4 months is they were all about relationships. Marriage, sex, love, all of that stuff. And I noticed a theme in many different arenas. I felt alone. And as I erased and erased and erased the layers from the unconscious mind, using the 7 steps to reprogramming yourself, I began to see that I needed to also work on other parts of myself because it wasn't fully going away, even though I was erasing it from the mind. I found out that it was also embedded in my body, physically in my body. And I discovered a book called Rebirthing in the New Age by Sandra Ray that helped me to understand and discover that it was in my body, where it came from, which was the birth trauma, and of course, how to get rid of that feeling. And so after working on the unconscious mind and all the thoughts, then I worked on the actual feeling trapped in the body, which wasn't based in words or thoughts. That's the big difference between mental and emotional. Mental is thoughts, actual words, beliefs, and emotional is feelings. And there's actually chemicals in your body that we call emotion that are not thoughts themselves, they're the actual feeling themselves. And so I had this feeling in my body that I was alone, even though I didn't have the thoughts anymore, because I erased all the negative thoughts. And doing the rebirthing process was what pushed out the feeling of loneliness from my body physically, which came from the birth trauma, which also came from being in the womb and recognizing that I wasn't actually wanted. This is one of the reasons why I think it's unhealthy for someone to have a child or bring a child into the world if the child isn't fully wanted. Not everyone in my family wanted me to be born, and I really felt that as a fetus. And if you don't think that's possible, just look up the research. It's a fact now that whatever happens to the fetus is part of the DNA or the programming of that person after they're born. And so I wasn't wanted. Then I had a horrible birth trauma, which most Americans do because of the way birthing is done in America. And if you have any questions about that, watch The Business of Being Born, which is an amazing documentary. And then also I'd really recommend you watch Birth into Being. That's an amazing movie about pain-free childbirth. It's something I cover in my health courses when I talk about childbirthing and pain-free childbirth and how to make that possible. That's actually only one little piece, is that recommended movie, but what a great movie. And it'll help you understand that in our country, in the United States of America, the birth trauma is horrible. And the rest of the world doesn't have this trauma, which might explain why we have so much murder and have more weapons than the rest of the world combined. Because we ultimately feel afraid of other people because we're born into a world in a traumatic way, and our first experience of being here is that it's scary. And one of my experiences was being taken away from my mom and put into a box, which made me feel alone. And I was left alone for a long time. And that's where the feeling of being alone actually came from. And I didn't have thoughts or words as a newborn infant on the day of being born. Can you imagine? And so the rebirthing process released that aspect of the feeling of being alone. So I worked both on the mind and on the body. And after I finished rebirthing and releasing that trauma of being born and being alone, I remember sitting on a couch, and it was in 2004, I think it was November, and I realized, although I was by myself and there was no one else in the house, I didn't feel alone. And I realized that the universe, and whatever you believe is in the universe, is with me, has always been with me. I was never actually ever alone. Every single thought you're having is being listened to by angels or spirit guides or your ancestors or whatever you believe in. God. I mean, if you believe in God, don't you think God's listening to every thought you have? If you believe in the universe, isn't the universe listening to you? You're never actually alone. Never. You're always with the great spirit, the great divine. Master Yoda called it the force. It doesn't matter what you call it. We're all talking about the same thing, aren't we? And so you're always with that. You're never by yourself. But you feel alone because of the traumas of the past, the programming of the past, some of which you inherited, some of which you brought with you, some of which you accumulated as a child. And as you undo these traumas of the past, whether you use the 7 Steps to Reprogramming Yourself, which is the first major tool of transformation, or a side auxiliary tool, which is not one of the 4 major tools, like rebirthing, or the other 3 major tools, which is the emotional repolarization technique, the 5-step emotional eraser, and completion, eventually as you use these tools, you'll find that you don't feel alone anymore, just like I don't feel alone anymore, even when I'm by myself. And I have to say, that was a hugely significant moment in my life to no longer feel alone. Because it was terrible to feel alone basically my whole life up until that moment when I realized I'm not alone and I don't feel that way anymore. And I've never felt that way since then. And that's obviously over 15 years ago as we're recording today in 2020. So over 16 years ago, and I've never felt that way again. I think this is something all people deserve. We all deserve to remove that feeling that we're alone and have the experience of being connected, of being surrounded by the world, the universe. And when we're with our friends and family, we're much more able to be present with their love for us because we don't have programming that says we're alone. Now, that doesn't mean you've cleared all your programming about receiving love or being with other people or being able to connect to other humans. You're going to have other arenas to work in, but at least the feeling of being alone will be gone if you work on that particular pattern or issue. I hope you're getting the idea that you might have many, many different aspects to your love life, to your relationships in general, your family and social friends relationships. And as you work on the different aspects, they'll improve. All of them will, which is, of course, a really good reason to work on them, isn't it? So take a deep breath and know that you don't have to be alone for the rest of your life or have the experience of being alone. That you can be happy and that you can feel connected even if you're by yourself if you do the inner work. Now, you might be saying, how do I learn about these tools? Where do I get them from? Click on the link below and you can take a free training, free webinar, or just learn more about the 4 major tools of transformation. I'm the inventor of the 7 Steps to Reprogramming Yourself and the 5-step emotional eraser. I learned and then modified and adapted the emotional repolarization technique and completion from other sources and made them my own because well, they're needed and no one in the world is teaching them. And so I'm the only person who has these tools available for anyone to learn. You can learn anytime you want. On-demand training is available for you. I would say just, watch some of my free training programs. Watch a free webinar and go from there. Maybe you'll want to watch Why Your Life Is the Way It Is. That one is a very life-changing workshop. And as of this moment, and I don't know, if you watch this video 5 years later, if it's still free, but as of right now, you can watch it for free. People have told me that just that webinar alone completely changed their life. And I want you to have that experience. And as you go through more of my free stuff, you'll begin to see that all the stuff I'm saying is actually true and I'm not full of crap. And maybe check out some of our testimonials and realize that there's something here that you deserve. All right, well, my name's Arnoux Goran. Please subscribe to my channel so we can stay in touch. Make some comments, and I'll talk to you soon.